It's time to talk about A Touch of Light by Thiago Abdalla. Hello everyone and welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Chris and today's video is all about A Touch of Light by Thiago Abdalla. My favourite line from this book came quite close to the end and it was, "That's the thing about light. All you need is a touch to see the horrors lurking in the dark." And that just sets up this book so beautifully. Now, I'll be completely honest, initially I thought that this book did not work for me. I thought that the stylistic choice of the author in terms of just throwing us as the reader in and not giving any sort of leeway between or explanation between the POVs was very jarring, and that execution didn't sit well with me as a reader. It didn't quite work. But if I sit back and I think about all of the individual elements of this book, a lot of them really do hit the mark and it is quite good. So if you can get past that jarring moments of those POVs and understand a little bit why that was done, then this book is made it a lot more enjoyable to get through this book. And like I said, all those individual elements really did hit the mark, starting with the cover. Now I do want to shout out the quality of this book. I got it on Amazon. I beat this book up over a period of about 5 days. So my aim was to read this at the end of the month for my end of month reading vlog, and I just abused it. I am a spine breaker by nature. I know, don't come for me non-spine breakers, but I will beat up a book and the spines will not look very good once I'm done with it. But I opened this book, I don't know, 500 times over 5 days and there's just not a dent on it. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, I thought that was worth mentioning, that the quality of the book, even through a distribution center like Amazon, is top notch. The next thing I want to talk about is the cover. This cover captures this story so well, and the more I look at it and the more I think about the cover art, I really have to applaud the artist and what they accomplished. So whoever did this cover, and Thiago, whoever you organised do this cover, is just done an amazing job. So right front and center we have the Ever Tree. This is a beacon of light. It's essentially this holy relic that we have in this book, and looking at it, it looks stunning and it's visually, that orange and that pop is amazing, but if you look closer and you see there are leaves falling off it, I don't know how well you're going to see that in that light, but you see that these leaves are falling off it and it kind of looks wrong. The colour that's draining from the underside of this tree doesn't look like it quite fits. And then you realise that it's decaying. These leaves are decaying and they're falling and they look like they shouldn't be, which they shouldn't. And then we have this sword down the bottom. This sword to me sort of symbolises the domain and the political powers that we have at play, and it's a clean sword in amongst this decay. And I think that this is just beautiful, just gorgeous, and the more I think about it, the more it fits the story. What a wonderful job that does of setting up what's inside the pages. Inside the book we're following 3 POVs. We've got Adrian, Lynn and Nasha, and the questions on the back of the book coincide with each individual's story. So we've got, how far would you go to resurrect someone you love? Would you change who you are to show you belong? And then there was a third one on the hardcover which related to the other character. I can't remember what it is. I apologize. So what I'm going to do, this review is going to be a little bit different, is I'm going to talk about each of the characters. Don't worry, it's non-spoiler. I'm not giving away anything really in the book. Let's talk about the characters. We have Adrian. He's the prince of the domain, where the blessed are gifted with these very, very long lives, and the people who die are basically deemed unworthy, so they get burned and forgotten. We're not allowed to mourn the dead, or we're not allowed to celebrate the dead. Once you're dead, you're gone. We're moving on with our lives. No one can really show any sort of emotion towards people who have passed away and been put to rest, unless they are deemed worthy enough to get covered in the sap of the Ever Tree. In which case they will be preserved until the promised day when there'll be some sort of resurrection and they'll wake again. Adrian's brother was burned and he needs to know why. He needs to get some answers about what his brother was doing and why he was deemed unworthy for this resurrection, for this promised day. So he traverses all over the domain, playing political powers in hopes of winning not only his father's approval, but the information to his burning questions, which he so desperately wants, all while fighting a madness that is spreading throughout the lands. Then we have Lynn, the Sentinel. Lynn was my favourite character in this book to follow. She was the most interesting. She was the most complex, and her character arc was very good as the story got along, and the chapters that I read with Lynn in it went much faster than the other two because I just couldn't wait to find out what she was doing and how her story was building. So she is a sentinel. She is basically this godlike power who brings death to people with the madness, except she wants to... She's running away from that life because she doesn't want to bring death to people anymore. She wants to try and stop death when the domain deems that this death is necessary. She tries to save lives now instead of killing people. Unfortunately for Lynn, this madness is coming back to the forefront and she's seeing it more and more, which means that with it has come to her responsibility to become the bringer of death once more. That is the role that she was born to play. Now, Lynn has these cool sentinel powers, the main one being that to become a sentinel, you have to bond with a mount, and the mounts in this particular book are griffins. So it almost feels like her soul is bonded to this mount and she draws her power from the griffin, and it fuels Lynn to be this awesome sentinel warrior character, and her storyline was just mesmerizing and I really, really enjoyed it. The third person that we follow is Nasha. Now, Adrian and Lynn's storylines sort of overlap a little bit, and then we have the third person, Nasha. So Nasha is a hunter. She is fighting her way through, so she fought her way through what's called a proving, to prove that she's part of the Rona. So she lives in this mountainous sort of, I believe, cold region with what they call the slopers, and she has fought through the proving to become Rona, and she's a hunter with 3 stripes, which means that she has proven herself to be quite capable of hunting, but she does carry a curse with her as well. This curse is emotion based. She can feel the emotions around her and it sometimes overpowers her, and when those emotions overpower her, it can have devastating effects. She can't let anyone know that she has this curse because she will be branded a witch, and who knows what happens to her in that case, but it could change the course of her life forever. Each of these stories individually were captivating, and I couldn't help but be sucked into the individual story as we were consuming it. It took a little bit for my brain to realize that we were just jumping headfirst into these different stories, and then once I'd figured that out, it became much easier to follow along with each story, plus this overarching theme of the madness and death that is happening throughout the world. Now, I mentioned this briefly at the beginning. This book requires the reader to be on point and for the reader to do a little bit of work. You need to be paying attention to this book. You can't let your brain slip or you'll miss something and you'll have to reread it. I did several times. We are thrown into this world whether we like it or not. It did feel like a scramble to start putting the pieces together. It took me till about page 120 to really start realizing that, okay, they're all very separate. I need to adjust my thinking and the way that I'm reading to really enjoy this book for what it is. Now, there is a prequel novella which has just come out. The prequel novella is called A Prelude to Ashes, and I would probably suggest reading that before jumping into this. Now, I have not read that novella. It came out after I started reading the main book, but I believe it sets up the world a little bit so that you're going into it knowing a little bit more about the world, and maybe it won't be so jarring to pick up the first full book after you've read that prequel novella. Now, another issue that I had with this book was some of the line editing choices. This is a personal nitpick. I have a line editor for a wife, and just from having her edit my own works, I've picked up on little things here and there as to what a line editor will look for when they're going through the book. So this was only an issue really in the first, say, 70 to 80 pages, where I felt the author picked a particular word or phrase and hyper-fixated on it. We had the word obsidian 9 times in 3 paragraphs at one point, and it would basically happen every couple of pages. So you'd have a series of 2 pages where one word would be repeated so frequently that I was like, what are we doing? Surely there's another way to say this. And it took me out of the story. So it happened with a few times, happened with a few names, happened with a few descriptor words, but it definitely got better as the story went on. So if you're very sensitive to things like that and repetition, just go in knowing that it does get better as the book goes on. Like I said, that's a nitpick, that's a me thing. It's not necessarily a thing that every reader is going to pick up, but I certainly did. Those two things aside, I really enjoyed all the individual elements of this story, which is why I still rated it about a 3.5, rounding it up to a 4 on Goodreads. So we had this overarching plot, which I don't think has really come to the forefront yet, but is definitely simmering underneath these character arcs and these character plot lines. There is a madness spreading throughout these lands, and each individual that we follow interacts with this madness at some point in a different way, and it affects them in a different way. There is also this political and religious element, and they are synonymous with one another. Often we see these elements fighting one another and having different ideals or working together, but in this book it definitely seems like they are one and the same, at least to me. And we had this manipulation of faith and power. We're questioning beliefs, we're questioning why people have faith in certain things, and this becomes apparent the further in you go to the book, how the political and religious elements interact with each of our characters. And because we're getting this sort of ×3 in different ways, it does make this world bigger and bigger the further that we go into it. I would say that this world is one that expands very, very slowly. It is definitely a character-driven book from the get-go, but it does have potential for that world to expand and to get bigger the further we go along into Abdalla's story. The magics were pretty cool. Again, there wasn't a great deal of it. We saw more in Lynn's character than the others, but that is something, again, that can be expanded upon and built upon in the next few books in the series. And because of those reasons, I am very interested to see where this series goes now that I understand the writing style and that I'm on board with that type of writing style, even though it was initially jarring. Those are my thoughts on A Touch of Light. Still quite enjoyed it, just a little bit different stylistically than things that I'm used to, but I will be picking up book 2 when that comes out and give it a go and see if I enjoy it anymore now that I sort of understand where the author is coming from. If you like the content, give it one of those. If you want to see more of it, then click subscribe at your will, and I will catch you in the next video. Ciao.